Hi there. I'm Phil. I go by Nimrandir on the internet, and I'm playing a new game. So, if you've followed stuff on my channel before, I tend to play games, kind of blind. I don't know the content of this specific game, but I can't say that I'm playing it fully blind because, as you can see, it's Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous, a role-playing game. Uh, sort of looks like it's in the vein of the older stuff like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, that kind of thing. Uh, I can't say I don't have any experience with Pathfinder. I've probably commented on other videos on the channel that I've got a fair amount of experience with Pathfinder. I've been involved with the system since, gosh, 2014 or something like that. So, while I don't know the exact story of this particular game, because while it's based on a published Pathfinder adventure, uh, I haven't actually played it, but I've got a fair amount of Pathfinder experience. So we'll see how that translates to the video game world, I suppose, once we actually get past this load screen. Here we go. All right. I've gone ahead and configured some settings, so I don't have to, putz around in that menu for you. So the troops are ready, Commander. And there's this, woman up at the top, but in a mirror. I don't think that's my character. It's not going to be my character. Anyway. So we got some DLCs. I'm just jumping into the main story here. And I've thought a little bit about this. So I've kind of expedited. I hit the wrong button. I need to hit square to proceed. So the game difficulty is structured. It's rather complicated stuff, but it feels sort of weird for me not to be playing on what's called the core setting, because it says that you can see choosing this difficulty is not recommended, not familiar with the Pathfinder system. I would not rank myself really highly on the system mastery scale, but I'm definitely familiar with the Pathfinder system, so I think we're just going to go with that. So, you get the warning. It's not recommended for players not familiar with the system, and this is as well as implementation of the game. I should be able to navigate it, so we're just going to hit accept. The one thing I'm worried about is it does say that the number of enemies are increased. A part of me is kind of half tempted to do like the custom thing and just turn down the number of enemies to the standard. Alright, so from here, you get an interesting array of pre-generated characters to pick from. I say interesting, I mean, they're kind of the things you might expect. I do think it's weird that it starts you with the Cavalier. So Cavaliers are like mounted combat specialists. You could be a cleric. It's kind of cool that they have the like a Oread, so it's like half Earth planar. Have a human fighter, a gnomish rogue, a tiefling slayer, which is kind of a rogue ranger hybrid, as I recall. A human sorcerer, but I don't really want to play any of those. So we're gonna go in the custom route. For the record, my character's not gonna match that silhouette either. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and go on in. Eventually, there we go. We have a fair number of character portraits to choose from. Gone back and forth on them because I'll be honest, none of them really look like the character I want to play. Like, as exciting as like Fox Wizard here would be, I'm not really interested in that. So, takes a while to scroll from one photo to another, which is a little unfortunate. But let's see, where was the character I was planning to use? Yeah, like I said, I scouted this out, so I didn't end up spending like 5 videos of character creation. So I'm planning on making somebody who's kind of like a barbarian. We'll talk about it more in a second, but this was kind of the coolest looking human barbarian picture. I thought about using one that was a dwarf, but we'll go with this. So, alright, you have a ton of class options. I was actually kind of surprised. And not only, like I said, they've implemented Pathfinder system fairly robustly, because you see it starts you with the Alchemist here. Not only could you just play like the baseline from the rulebook Alchemist, there's a bunch of things called archetypes that you can sort of, swap out class features for if you wanted to be a healing alchemist or a chirurgeon, or there's the vivisectionist, which is kind of creepy to me, but anyway. So what I'm actually considering doing is various classes. Like I said, I'm gonna do my best not to go into long tangents about the system in question, but So I wanted to go into the, I want to make what's called a Blood Rager. So they're sort of a half barbarian, half sorcerer. So again, the base Blood Rager is, I played a base Blood Rager in the tabletop system. It's been a while. I was actually considering just straight up making that character, but then it turned out that, there were some, options that I was wanting to explore instead. So, to be perfectly honest, I've gone back and forth. A part of me wanted to do this thing called the Primalist, because there's not really a downside to picking a Primalist over a regular Blood Rager. You basically just straight up get more options. But I think I finally ended up deciding I wanted to come down to this one called the Steel Blood. So Blood Ragers normally wear lighter armor. The Steel Blood kind of tanks it up a bit more. So I'm a little worried about this because, again, I have a fair amount of Pathfinder experience. I'm not sure exactly how much boosting, my armor class is really going to matter in the grand scheme of things, but I'm still going to go for it. So Steel Blood, Blood Rager it is. You have plenty of... I'm used to the newer edition of Pathfinder where we call these things ancestries instead of races for a couple of different reasons. Again, I don't want to go into it. So I think I'm going to stick with the human. You have some options. I do think it's interesting that you could play Aasimar or a tiefling, so sort of with celestial blood in your ancestry, or, fiendish in the case of the tiefling. But of the choices I have available to me, I'm just going to go fairly generic human at this point, just for some extra stuff they get. So you can choose your gender as well, but I'm going to stick with a male for reasons that will become apparent eventually. You can choose a background, which this is actually something I think of more with the current second edition of Pathfinder than with the first. But you've got some interesting choices here based on, craftsmen. If you're interested in the Pathfinder world, you see all these names about Aldori, Verizian, and whatnot. Those might mean something to you if you're familiar with the setting. I wasn't going to go with any of those specifically. I saw the craftsman options, and I kind of couldn't help myself, because I just think it's funny. I'm probably actually going to use a great axe with this character, which I think is a little fun, but it's not something I've actually used before. It means those D12s that I have in my dice bag that I never, I generally don't use. They're just, they just kind of sit around. But they kind of tweaked the system in that if you get extra proficiency with a weapon, it actually gives you, it looks like a +1 bonus to attack rolls, and I thought that was kind of neat. It also gives me sort of a flat bonus to athletics, which is a skill as I recall, I'm going to be accessing later. So I'm actually picking Lumberjack, to be perfectly honest, because of an old animated series. I think it was on the Escapist website called Unforgotten Realms, where there was a character who made a joke about Lumberjack not being a class. So I just think it's funny that while it's not a class, I can pick it as a background. So Lumberjack it is. Now, if you're not familiar with tabletop role-playing stuff, so the Pathfinder uses a point buy system. If you ever played Baldur's Gate or Icewind Dale, those old PC computer games, the PC role-playing games, PC computer was redundant. Anyway, so in those games, it would roll a bunch of 6-sided dice to determine your stats, and then you could kind of play around with the numbers. I think it's sort of interesting here because, Pathfinder does away with that, so you kind of just invest points. I've got a pool of 25 to spend, and the more you put into something, the more expensive it is. I spent 10 points to get my, I spent, I've got I had 25 points available to me here. So, and then it takes me 10 of those 25 to get my strength up to an 18, where I kind of want it for a melee damage dealer. So it looks like I've spent them all now, and I haven't actually touched my mental stats. And you'll notice the little thumbs up says, you want some charisma, you doof. Turns out you can do a little stat dumping. So my Blood Rager is not going to be terribly intelligent, but he'll have some wisdom, and he'll have some charisma. So that way, the charisma will matter for my spell casting when I finally get it. It's going to take a while, but anyway, so there's my ability score layout. So you can't dump any further in case anybody's hoping. You could go the Baldur's Gate, like in Baldur's Gate or Icewind Dale, you could dump a stat that you didn't really need. Intelligence and Charisma were kind of common choices, just you took them all the way down to the minimum of 3. So you had more points for the stats that quote-unquote mattered. Anyway, so that's my stat layout. So 18 Strength, 14 Dexterity, 16 Constitution, 7 Intelligence, 12 Wisdom, 12 Charisma. Alright, fantastic. So now I can pick skill points. So, I definitely want Athletics, and you can only put 1 rank per skill in at the beginning. So Athletics is going to help me if I need to, push things or, jump, climb, that kind of stuff. Seems like things that, a barbarian-type character should be able to do, right? I also, I can't help but put stuff into Perception. It's, the Pathfinder Perception is like the most important skill in the game, so putting ranks into it is almost a gimme. And then we have Persuasion. When I play tabletop role-playing games, I tend to be the kind of person who tries to talk his way out of fights. So, going with Persuasion, I've already got some Charisma because of the Blood Rager thing. It makes sense. They did streamline the skill system a bit from the classic tabletop system, because Persuasion sort of includes both, lying to somebody, bluffing, like regular diplomacy type stuff, or, intimidation. So I'm imagining him as more of an intimidating character. One nice touch I wanted to point out, and I think this is kind of nice. So in the tabletop system, there's a whole bunch of skills called knowledge. So here they've broken them up into a couple of knowledges and a couple of things called lore. I think this is a cool change because the knowledge skills are based off your intelligence, and arcana would be like magical stuff. The world things would be like, knowing things about geography, that kind of thing. I think it kind of makes sense for those to be intelligence-based. It always kind of punished like clerics and druids, like, the wisdom-based spellcasters, that things like knowledge of nature and knowledge of religion were still keyed off their intelligence. Now they've actually turned those lore skills so that they work off religion instead, which I think is kind of cool. I'm still not taking any of them because thanks to that dumped intelligence, I only had the 3 ranks, so that's where they're going. Okay, so now we'll move on to feat choices. This game gives you an awful lot of feat choices. So I'm not going to talk about every single option that I actually have available here. I've already picked out a couple of options, that are sort of like tabletop staples. For what it's worth, my son, when he was looking at this, he saw me pick this thing, Power Attack. I can't believe it's not marked. It's like melee damage dealers. Power Attack was like the most commonly taken feat I probably ever saw in the game. So it makes it less likely I hit somebody, but when I hit them, I'm going to hit them like a truck. Is effectively what it does. It's almost obligatory. So I think it's weird that it doesn't mark it as you should take this. Anyway, so the other feat, I thought about like being super boring and just taking an additional bonus with my weapon, as you said, taking weapon focus. Another option, dodge for additional armor class, that kind of thing. Blood Rager, as you say, Blood Ragers use, they have a thing called Blood Rage, where they, kind of hype themselves up into a bit of a fury and do extra damage while being a little easier to hit. They can only do that so much per day. I thought about taking extra Blood Rage, but I mentioned I'm kind of a talker, so I'm going to take Persuasive, because it gives me a bonus both to Persuasion and Perception. So that takes the I don't have many skill ranks, but the ones I've taken I'm really, really good at. So I may end up paying for this later, but I think that's the way I'm going to go here. So now Blood Ragers, their powers, kind of like a sorcerer, come from something in their lineage. You get a whole lot of choices here. So I could have Abyssal Demonic Influence, just generic Arcane. Celestial, I'm honestly kind of inclined to say that Celestial's probably would be the most useful choice, just in terms of like what it gives, but I don't really want to use it. So I mean, it seems kind of like a gimme, but for the concept I'm going for, I don't think it works so much. So I'm kind of leaning towards the Draconic options, and I think I'm going to go with the brass option. So I really don't like the first ability that much, but I get some extra stuff along the way I'll be able to choose, so I think that's kind of cool. So we're going to go ahead and lock in the Draconic Brass. You can choose a deity. I think this is interesting. I looked through the options. It doesn't include every deity that's in Pathfinder. It's got a lot of them. So if you're familiar with the setting, or for that matter, if you're familiar with with Dungeons and Dragons, some of them they're just kind of like Dungeons and Dragons deities with the serial numbers filed off. Like Gorham is kind of Tempest, if you're familiar with the Forgotten Realms. Like Torag is very much, he's just like Moradin, like the Dwarven deity. But my personal favorite is Shaylin, the Eternal Rose, the goddess of art and beauty. I had one of my favorite Pathfinder characters was a paladin of Shaylin, but for the purposes of this character, I am actually going to go with Caden Kalian, the known as the Drunken Hero. For what it's worth, in universe, he is a guy who kind of got blackout drunk and woke up and somehow became a deity, and even he doesn't really remember how. More or less, I'm picking him because of the bravery and freedom thing. I don't particularly care about my character being like a drunkard. I just like the bravery, freedom part of things. So, anyway. So alignment-wise, what I think is interesting about the system is, generally speaking, the deity you choose to worship, if you're like a cleric, kind of locks you into certain alignments. Apparently, in the game, you get locked into certain alignments, by picking a deity at all. Normally you can only sort of like move one step on the two-dimensional, good, evil, law, chaos. I'm going to go with neutral good for this character. Alright, this could be potentially daunting, because there's a lot of different choices here. The good news is, I've kind of already picked all of these things out for myself. So, let's see. Alright. Although, yeah, sorry, I wasn't trying to change the skin color. I got messed up. I want the, where was the face? I actually wrote all of these down earlier. So, let's see. Yeah, that's the face I wanted. Alright, I don't want any scars. The eye color, I was looking for like something that's a hazel. Do I have other options? Let's see. Don't have a ton of options. I think of what it's giving me. I think that one I'm going to call the closest to hazel. Alright. So now, where's my hairstyle? I need to turn myself to the back so I can see. Let's see. Was that the one? Let's see. I actually think I do like that long. I wanted longer hair, so there we'll go with that. There's only really the two longer options, so I don't want a beard, so I can move on. The war paint, I spent forever working on this, trying to get this right for my concept. So let me see here. So you can actually layer apparently 5 different sets of war paint on your character, which I thought was kind of cool. So yeah, I've actually got notes here that I'm looking at to get this right. So, okay. So I've got to do a lot of scrolling here, bear with me, as I get to the right coloration for this. I feel bad this guy in the herky-jerk slow motion as he keeps trying to pivot around, was the game's trying to keep up with my color selections. Okay. Almost there. Alright, yeah. I want this purple. Alright. Now I can hit triangle and pick a different pattern. So, let's see. Okay. So, yeah, so you can kind of layer different colors over top of it. I thought that was neat. I almost missed this and just had a single color. And then I realized, ooh, I can pick more. Alright. Alright. One more that I want to pick, and this one's actually the fastest of the bunch once I get back up to the right menu. I keep cycling through colors instead of choosing, the actual design I want. There we go. And some of you may recognize what I'm trying to do here. If you do, fantastic. If not, it's also okay. I won't hold it against you. Alright, so I've got... trying to work on that eye color. I think... again, I think it is as close to hazel. Let me see here. Yeah, so... let me try just going like a pale green. I think that might look a little better. I can't quite tell. I can barely tell that the eye color is changing, actually, but... what if I do... yeah, we'll go with that. Okay. The eye color is like the one thing I didn't, play around with earlier. Alright. So now I have my clothes colors, which I have very specific clothes colors in mind. So... wanted that color around his belt, and then let's scale this way back. Come on. The fantasy music in the background while I do this. Okay, there we go. I decided I was going to stick with the orange. So, alright, so I think I've got his coloration picked out. There we go. I was going to say all of his outfit stuff.
We do it my way.
And you can pick a voice. That one? No. We're going with aggressive.
My wounds pile on.
My wounds pile on.
All this waiting bores me.
Yeah, all the waiting bores him. So yeah, the aggressive is appropriate for a Blood Rager, I think. Alright, so got his birth date picked out. Sarenrath, 6 months, so I guess the corresponds to June 16th. Here's our name. Helwig. Helwig the Last Warrior. So that's what I got picked out here.
I am superior!
So for what it's worth, if you get the reference, fantastic. If you don't, we can still be friends. So the character sheet kind of just sums up everything that you've got available. I think at this point, I'm pretty much good to go. But I've also been recording for getting close to 22 minutes now. So, I think it's probably a good idea to press pause on the video at this stage, and then come back with another one, to actually, get into the gameplay and stuff. Character creation, it's a thing. So, anyway, do appreciate you watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, listening to me talk about Pathfinder a bit, build my character. Nimrandir will catch you next time.